There are too many foreigners in the United States. Last week, Speaker John Boehner basically said that immigration reform is dead. Soon after that, an organization seemed to take credit for what he said. You may not have heard of them. They're called Numbers USA. Their mission, limit the number of immigrants who come into this country. And their executive director, Roy Beck, joins us now from Washington. Mr. Beck, thanks so much for talking to us. I really appreciate that.
Greetings.
So after Speaker Boehner's announcement that he's not going to even debate immigration reform, you tweeted the following, that unrelenting grassroots pressure was behind Boehner's first-time no-conference pledge. So are you taking credit for what he said?
We certainly take some of the credit, and we've mobilized our 2.5 million engaged followers, but there are millions of other Americans who expressed their opinions as well. And in the end, I think that the Senate bill collapsed under the weight of high unemployment and low wages. This is an incredibly difficult economic time to be trying to have a drastic increase in immigration and foreign workers. In the end, I think that drove the public to put the kind of pressure on Republican members of the House, who then put the pressure on Speaker Boehner to make this announcement.
Mr. Beck, clearly you're against immigration reform, but your view on immigration reform is not shared by the majority of Americans. 87% of Americans, according to a Gallup poll, support a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. So why do you support that? Isn't that what you want, a better economy?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of polls, and most of those polls, in fact, I think all of the polls that show a support for path to citizenship describe a bill that is not the Senate bill. It's very important to understand that the Senate bill doubles immigration. It doubles the number of lifetime work permits that will be given to new immigrants coming into this country. This is never asked in the question. American people are not asked in those particular questions, but the polling that does ask Americans whether they think we have a labor shortage and whether we need more immigrant workers shows that Americans overwhelmingly say no, we do not have a labor shortage. In fact, we have way too many workers in this country. We need to tighten the labor market.
So can we concentrate then on the 11.7 million undocumented immigrants who are in this country? So what would you do with them? I mean, they're not going back to the country of origin. You know that. So what would you do with them?
Yeah. The chief responsibility of the U.S. Congress is what do you do with the 20 million Americans who cannot find a full-time job, who want a full-time job and cannot find one. It's true, there's a question about what to do with the 11 million that are here illegally, but that is not the primary concern of the U.S. Congress. They've got 20 million Americans, disproportionately Hispanic Americans, who can't find a full-time job. That bill, the fact is that we can't set aside and talk about just the 11 million because the Senate bill isn't about just the 11 million. It also is about 20 million more lifetime work permits that would be given out over the next 10 years. The Senate saddled the amnesty part with this gigantic increase in foreign labor that the business community wanted. But it's the kind of thing that allows Walmart to have employees at such cheap wages.
But you know, they are here because there are millions of Americans who benefit from their work, thousands of companies who hire them. So again, the question is, what would you do with them? Mitt Romney tried the idea of self-deportation, and obviously it didn't work. He not only lost the Hispanic vote, he lost the election. So is self-deportation an option for you?
The most important thing is to make sure that people from other countries cannot illegally hold jobs in this country. That's what you do. You do not allow people from other countries to come in and take jobs illegally. And
I understand, Mr. Beck, but the question is really what to do with them.
That's what you do with them. You take away, you have mandatory verify and make sure that people who are here illegally cannot have jobs, so that you open them up to the 20 million Americans who are looking for jobs.
Mr. Beck, do you think there's an invasion going on right now here in the United States? Do you think there are too many immigrants in this country?
There's not an invasion going on, but there is a lack of a rule of law. And the biggest problem is that our government for 20 years has been bringing in 1 million new lifetime work permit people a year. That's a four-time increase.
Too many? That's too many? I mean, are there too many?
It's far too many. In fact, Numbers USA was formed to advocate for immigration reform. The only bipartisan commission on immigration reform that the government has had recommended cutting immigration in half in order to help the more vulnerable members of our society.
But Mr. Beck, in the early last century, the percentage of immigrants in this country was about 15%. Right now, according to the CBO, the number of immigrants in this country is about 13%. So what's the problem? I mean, or are you concerned that the percentage of non-whites, non-Hispanic whites in this country is decreasing? Is that the problem?
That has nothing to do with it. No, if you, in fact, I've written a book on this.
Of course.
If you look at a century ago, that period of high immigration was a period just like now of incredible income disparity, stagnant and declining real wages, high unemployment. What happened was we had about a 30-year period of high spiked immigration, just like we've had now. The immigrant population, just like particularly the Hispanic population today, had very high poverty rates. Fortunately, Congress cut immigration back, tightened the labor market, wages went up. We were able to see, for example, Italians,
but percentage-wise, about a century ago now, it's about the same. Yeah, percentage-wise, it's about the same. So
and that's my point. My point is that 100 years ago, when the percentage of immigration was this high, it was disastrous economically for the more vulnerable people of this society, and most importantly for the immigrants themselves.
But maybe the perception is that you want to deport people who are coming from Latin America, people with brown skin like mine. That might be the perception, Mr. Beck.
I can't help what a perception be, but that's not the case. Now, you mentioned deportation. Yeah. Deportation has never been Numbers USA's prime interest, because we believe there's very little need for deportation if you take away the jobs magnet. However, we have to recognize every country in the world has immigration policies. Every country in the world has deportation policies. If you don't have some deportation policy, you don't have an immigration policy, which means you don't have a country, because you cannot protect the most vulnerable members of your society. In this case, Black and Hispanic Americans are the most vulnerable members of our society.
Mr. Beck, just one last question, and this is a question I have to ask you because it's related to the reputation of your organization. What's your relationship with John Tanton, a very controversial figure who has openly criticized the Latinization of the United States?
We have no organic relationship. I know John Tanton. I first met him when I was a newspaper reporter back in the 70s.
But do you support his ideas?
Pardon?
Do you support his ideas?
Which idea is that?
Well, the idea that the Latinization of the United States is wrong, the idea that non-Hispanic whites are decreasing, and that he doesn't like that?
No, that has nothing to do with it. In fact, that's why our name of our organization is Numbers USA. The problem is the numerical level of immigration from all over the world. And as I've said over many times in the past, I feel that our organization, for example, is doing the most important work that could be done for the Latin American population in this country. And that is tighten the labor market, because everything else economically and socially flows from people having good paying jobs and having a job in the first place.